Okay, let's just get right into it. If you're joining me today, chances are you've felt it at some point, right? A profound, almost unexplainable exhaustion that just seems to sit deep in your bones, no matter how many hours of sleep you get. Well, today we're taking a pretty fascinating journey through this explainer. We're going to deconstruct the invisible, systemic cages that were quite literally engineered to keep us tired, and we'll map out a concrete, biological, and psychological path to your own personal liberation. I really want you to ask yourself, are you living on a continuous loop of exhaustion? You probably know the exact feeling I'm talking about. The racing heart, the dry mouth, that constant low-grade dread before you even step out of bed. Society is always telling us that burnout is an individual failure, that you just aren't resilient enough or you need to try harder. But what if that somatic panic, that literal physical anxiety in your body, is actually a biological reality? What if your burnout is really just a healthy bodily demand for autonomy? So, to figure out why our bodies are screaming at us, we have to look at part one, the cage of modern productivity. We need to transition into looking at how our modern relationship with labor wasn't an accident. It was deliberately engineered. Just look at how this architecture was built over time. Back in 1773, the Enclosure Acts in England literally forced humanity off shared common land, which created this brand new structural reliance on factory wages just to survive. Then, fast forward to 1926. History absolutely loves to celebrate Henry Ford for giving us the 40-hour workweek, but our sources reveal a totally different story. This wasn't some gift of benevolence. Ford reduced the workweek to 8-hour shifts because his own internal data showed that a human being's physical efficiency plummeted after exactly 8 hours. So, the 40-hour week? It was just a biological hack designed to maximize output before the human machinery broke down. Now compare that historical cage to what we actually lost in the transaction. The ancient Greeks, folks like Aristotle, viewed leisure as this highly active pursuit, eudaimonia, or flourishing. You achieved it through deep reflection, philosophical debate, actually engaging with the world. But look at our reality today. We've fallen headfirst into what the sources call the recovery trap. Our free time isn't used to build ourselves up anymore. It's used for sedation. We rely on cheap dopamine and endless doom scrolling just to numb our nervous systems enough so we can survive another week of wage slavery. And as if that external cage wasn't bad enough, things get even more intense when we realize the cage has recently moved inside our own minds. Welcome to part two, the auto-exploitation trap. According to the philosopher Byung-Chul Han, we are now trapped in something called auto-exploitation. This is an internalized mandate where you are simultaneously the master and the slave. Think about it. We treat ourselves like the relentless CEO of You Inc. We track our sleep, we optimize our diets, we try to monetize every single hobby we have. We've willingly stepped into a digital panopticon, an invisible prison of constant self-observation, where we actually exploit ourselves way more efficiently than any factory boss ever could. So the crucial takeaway here is that this engineered system fundamentally drains our biological batteries. It's wild to think that a staggering 85% of our life force is extracted by the system. We are left with just barely enough energy to rest, recover, and then return to the grind the next morning. Burnout isn't a glitch in this system, guys. It is a perfectly calibrated feature. But how do we actually break out? To reclaim all that trapped energy, we move to part three, dancing with your shadow. This is where we shift our focus inward. We have to completely reframe our creative paralysis, our anxiety, and our somatic fear. We can't see them as stop signs anymore, but rather as a compass guiding us toward our own raw power. I want you to visualize this incredibly visceral Jungian metaphor from the source material. Imagine a giant, terrifying tarantula screaming right in your face. Okay, that tarantula represents the untouched shadow side of our psyche. It's our suppressed anger, our weirdness, our deepest, ugliest flaws. Society demands that we hide the shadow so we can remain highly polished and employable. But keeping that door locked takes massive, exhausting energy. Our sources challenge us to do the exact opposite. Take the tarantula by the hand and dance with it. Practically, this means actively integrating your unloved wounds. When you confront the fear, treating it like a check engine light on a dashboard rather than just ignoring it, you actually downregulate your nervous system's alarm bells. By accepting your darkest, messiest flaws, you completely neutralize your fear of exposure. You literally remove society's ammunition against you, and in doing so, you unlock an impenetrable, incredibly authentic creative magnetism. Now, let's pivot a bit to part four, The meeting of two lacks, because when we suppress those shadows, it absolutely sabotages our attempts at healthy love and connection. When we're terrified that our real messy selves are fundamentally unlovable, we enter what psychoanalysts call the theater of masks. And the math of this is just wild. On any given romantic date, there are at least 6 versions of people interacting in the room. There's who you actually are, the masked version you're performing, the idealized version the other person created of you in their head, and then those exact same 3 layers for them. It is an exhausting, invisible performance. To finally drop the masks, we have to embrace a huge paradigm shift introduced by Jacques Lacan, known as the lack. The lack is that persistent, subtle ache of incompleteness at the center of being human. We usually panic when we feel it and try to use a partner to fill that void. But here is the profound reframing. If you were a perfectly complete, closed circle, there would be 0 room for anyone else to ever enter your life. True love isn't 2 halves magically becoming one. It's 2 incomplete people bravely sitting in a room, witnessing each other's voids. This completely shatters how we usually view romance, doesn't it? We obsess over eros, that passive, dizzying hunger, and the illusion that we found our missing puzzle piece. But when that initial spark inevitably fades, it doesn't mean the love is dead. Actually, that exact moment is when agape begins. Agape is an active, daily choice. It is rigorous devotion and parallel evolution. It's where you actively resist the toxic urge to merge into one person, and instead you choose to walk parallel trails together. And true connection isn't just psychological either. It's deeply biological. Take the ancient 5,000-year-old greeting, Namaste. It is not just some trendy yoga sign-off. It is a literal biological technology. By pressing your fingertips together and bowing, you stimulate nerve endings that trigger a vagus nerve reset. This creates a physiological pause that completely interrupts the brain's rapid-fire threat assessments and instant judgments. It forcefully levels social hierarchies, centering the nervous system so you can recognize shared humanity before a single word is even spoken. So, we've deconstructed the systemic cage, we've talked about integrating our shadows, and we've learned the mechanics of authentic connection. Now we reach the ultimate step of this explainer in Part 5, playing life by design. If you want to stop playing life by default, you have to master these actionable rules. First, track your wins. Our brains have an ancient negativity bias designed for survival, meaning they will literally delete your history of success to keep you hyper-focused on threats. Writing down your wins manually overwrites that corrupted data. Second, extract data from losses. Treat a failure like a grandmaster analyzing a chessboard. Extract the lesson without letting the loss become your permanent identity. And third, break character. Intentionally glitch your old, outdated survival identities by acting entirely outside of your usual script. But to actually execute these rules, we have to face one final, massive hurdle. It was perfectly diagnosed by the philosopher Soren Kierkegaard. He argued there is a massive abyss between endlessly analyzing a decision in the safe realm of possibility and actually pulling it down into the concrete friction of real existence. Simply put, thinking about being brave isn't the same as actually being brave. Kierkegaard warned of 3 specific traps we use to avoid the heavy responsibility of existing. The thinker gets completely paralyzed building flawless logical systems, but forgets to actually live. The aesthete chases endless novelty and quick pleasures, absolutely terrified to commit to anything because it means closing doors. And the mass man safely hides in the crowd, surrendering all personal responsibility just to blend in and avoid standing alone. You simply cannot think your way out of these traps. Logic and data will only walk you right to the edge of the cliff. The only way to authentically exist is to make the leap. The leap isn't some smooth, logical transition. It is a passionate, violent halt to your infinite overthinking. It is the raw, internal decision of your own will that finally mutates possibility into concrete reality. Which brings us right to the end of our journey today. I want you to look at your life right now. Are you building a magnificent, perfectly optimized castle in your mind while refusing to actually live in it? What is that one concrete action, that leap, that you are currently avoiding by hiding in the safety of your own thoughts? It's time to put down the blueprints, step out of the cage, and jump into reality today. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and I'll see you on the next one.
Have you ever felt just a pit of absolute dread in your stomach at like 3:00 p.m. on a Sunday afternoon, even though you have what society would call a supposedly good job?
Oh, yeah. The classic Sunday scaries, but like on a visceral level.
Exactly. I mean, that visceral sinking feeling. And it's weird because usually when we talk about a medical diagnosis, there's this expectation of precision, right? Like engineering.
Right. It's very binary. It's clean.
Yeah. You break your arm, the x-ray shows that jagged white line, and the doctor just points at it and says, there it is. That's the problem.
You have a pathogen, you get an antibiotic, you have a fracture, you get a cast. The causality is entirely visible.
But then you step into the world of modern exhaustion, right? Neurodevelopment, psychological burnout, and suddenly the x-ray machine is just totally useless. We're looking at a diagnostic landscape that is completely murky.
It's incredibly muddy.
Yeah, I mean, imagine walking into a clinic and describing a literal pit in your stomach every single Sunday. You described chronic exhaustion that a full night of sleep just does not fix. Elevated blood pressure, a profound sense of, dissociation for about 8 hours a day.
And the doctor just puts down the chart, looks at you, and basically says, well, there's no disease here. You're just employed.
Exactly. You're just employed. It's wild.
It is the absolute definition of diagnostic muddy waters. Because what you were describing is a physiological reality that our modern society has just completely normalized.
We've just accepted it.
Right. We've accepted it as the baseline cost of being an adult.
Which is exactly why we are here today. We are going on a massive intellectual journey for this deep dive, pulling from an incredibly dense, eye-opening stack of sources.
Yeah, we have a lot of ground to cover.
We really do. We've got 19th century philosophy from Søren Kierkegaard, ancient Aristotelian concepts, and then modern creators and theorists, people like Tom Skylas, Alexa Saranoga, Yasmin, and the philosopher Byung-Chul Han.
And just to give you a sense of where we're heading today, we're going to trace that 3.0 p.m. Sunday feeling all the way back to its historical roots. We'll look at how the 40-hour work week was literally engineered.
Oh, the engineering part is fascinating.
It really is. And we'll look at how modern algorithms are managing human beings, like factory machinery. And then, most importantly, how to actually break out of it. We're talking about shadow work, biological autonomy, and totally reframing how you experience existence itself.
And really quickly, just before we jump into all that, a quick disclaimer. The authors and theorists we are looking at today make some incredibly sharp critiques of modern economic systems, historical institutions, and even institutional religion.
Very sharp critiques, yeah.
Right. And we aren't here to take a side politically or theologically. We're just looking at the architecture of these ideas. We want to impartially explore these frameworks, see what they reveal about the human condition, and basically just let you draw your own conclusions.
Exactly. We're strictly mapping the territory here.
Okay, so let's start by looking at the water we're swimming in right now, the 40-hour work week. One of the modern writers we're diving into, Tom Skylas, uses a phrase that immediately gets your back up. He calls it wage slavery.
Right. Which, on its face, sounds like internet hyperbole.
It totally does. But then when you look at the historical data he pulls, it is staggering. I mean, we are constantly sold this narrative that modern technology has given us the absolute zenith of human leisure.
Which is a complete myth.
Right, because historical estimates reveal that a 15th century medieval peasant actually enjoyed anywhere from 80 to 150 days off per year.
Let that sink in.
I know. Meanwhile, a modern tech-empowered corporate employee is absolutely thrilled to get 10 to 14 days of paid vacation. How in the world do we automate everything and end up working more days than a peasant in the Middle Ages? Let's unpack this.
Well, to understand that, you have to look at how the modern workforce was artificially engineered. The historian E.P. Thompson has this brilliant framework where he categorizes the shift in human labor from what he calls task-oriented work to time-oriented work.
Okay, break that down for me. What's the difference?
So for thousands of years, human labor was task-oriented. You farmed your land, you built a shelter, you harvested crops. You were answering to the task itself, right? Not to a clock on a wall.
Oh, I see. So when the harvest was done, the work was just done.
Exactly. Your time belonged to you, and it was perfectly aligned with the natural biological rhythms of the seasons.
Yeah.
You had massive periods of intense, back-breaking labor, sure.
Right, it wasn't easy.
No, not at all. But those were followed by deep, extended periods of rest, community, celebration.
Right, so a peasant in winter wasn't sitting in a cubicle pretending to look at a spreadsheet. They were just resting.
Precisely. They were repairing tools, spending time with family. But the Industrial Revolution required a total inversion of that biological paradigm. It demanded time-oriented work.
Enter the factory whistle?
Yes, the factory whistle replaced the sun. You suddenly owed the system your time, regardless of whether there was actual, meaningful, productive work to fill it.
Wow.
And this didn't just happen organically, it was heavily legally engineered. A prime example in the sources is the Enclosure Acts in England, which peaked around 1773.
Okay, this is the part that totally blew my mind. Tell the story of what actually happened to these villages.
So imagine you live in an English village in the 1700s. For generations, your community has shared vast amounts of what they called common land. It belongs to no single landlord. You could forage for food, graze a few sheep, grow enough crops to survive somewhat independently.
So you weren't rich, but you had basic autonomy.
Exactly. But then the government passes laws that privatize millions of acres of this public land. Overnight, literal fences go up.
So they essentially stripped the public of their ability to be self-sufficient, just legally took it away.
Yes. And it was a deliberate strategy to artificially engineer a desperate labor force. I mean, think about it. If a family could feed themselves with a small garden and a shared pasture, they would never voluntarily agree to walk into a dark, dangerous, coal-fired factory and work 14 hours a day.
Right. Why would you? You'd just stay home.
Exactly. So the system needed a mass migration into factory towns. So they fenced off the lifeblood of the independent worker. They even passed laws later on that essentially criminalized poverty.
Wait, criminalized it how?
If you tried to survive outside the factory system and failed, you were sent to a punitive workhouse. The choice was engineered to be absolute. You either submit to the factory system or you face total ruin.
Wait, hold on. I have to push back here because I can hear the listener thinking exactly what I'm thinking right now.
Yeah.
We can't just demonize the evolution of industry, right? I mean, we're going to talk about Henry Ford standardizing the 40-hour work week in 1926. Isn't giving people an 8-hour day and a weekend undeniably, objectively better than Victorian sweatshops? I mean, it saved lives. Isn't it a bit cynical to criticize that?
Well, physically,
Yeah.
it is vastly superior. Absolutely. No one is arguing we should go back to 14-hour days in a textile mill.
Okay, good.
But the critique here focuses on what that compromise actually locked into place. Think of it as the comfortable cage concept.
The comfortable cage.
Yeah. By reducing the hours just enough to stop workers from permanently revolting, the system basically pacified the labor movement. It permanently stalled the trajectory toward true leisure.
What do you mean by stalling the trajectory?
Look at the economist John Maynard Keynes. In the early 20th century, he looked at the rise of machines and automation, and he logically predicted that by the 21st century, we would have a 15-hour work week.
Right, because of all the efficiency.
Exactly. His math made total sense. If a machine can do the work of 10 men, you should only have to work 1/10 of the time to produce the same societal value.
But that obviously didn't happen.
No, it didn't happen because the efficiency gains from technology didn't go downward to the worker in the form of free time. They went upward to the owners in the form of extreme wealth accumulation.
Wow.
We accepted the baseline premise that our time belongs to the employer by default. We accepted that for a century, despite unprecedented technological gains. And Henry Ford knew exactly what he was doing.
Right, because Ford wasn't doing this out of the goodness of his heart. He wasn't a humanitarian.
Not at all. Ford was absolutely ruthless, and he was driven entirely by data. His internal efficiency experts found a biological ceiling.
A biological ceiling.
Yeah. They discovered that after exactly 8 hours of continuous repetitive manual labor, human efficiency plummeted. The human body literally gives out. Mistakes go up, expensive machinery breaks.
So the 8-hour day wasn't about work-life balance at all. It was just a mathematical productivity hack.
A biological hack to squeeze the absolute maximum output from human bodies before they broke. And there was a secondary macroeconomic motive, too.
Which was what?
Ford realized that if his workers were in the factory for 16 hours a day, 6 days a week, they had absolutely no time to drive a car, let alone buy one.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah. By giving them the weekend off and paying them a slightly higher daily wage, he manufactured his own consumer base. He gave them just enough free time and just enough disposable income to become consumers of the very products they were sacrificing their lives to build.
So we traded the key to our autonomy for a slightly bigger, slightly more comfortable cage. But, I mean, how did we all get conditioned to just accept this? We are talking about billions of people essentially agreeing to live inside this invisible arena without questioning it.
The answer to that lies in what theorists call the kindergarten fence.
The kindergarten fence.
Yeah. If you want to understand the modern worker, you have to look at the physical and psychological architecture of the modern public school system, which was heavily modeled after the Prussian system in the 19th century.
Okay.
The underlying argument in the sources here is that the curriculum isn't just math, literature, and geography. There is a hidden curriculum of obedience.
Okay, let's unpack that because that sounds intense. A curriculum of obedience.
Think about the inherent nature of a child. They are physically dynamic, wildly energetic, deeply, uncontrollably curious.
Oh, yeah. Constantly moving.
But the institutional system requires them to completely suppress that chaotic biological nature for 8 hours a day. They must sit completely still at a desk. They must obey arbitrary and mechanical bells that dictate exactly when they can move from one room to another.
Which perfectly mimics the factory whistle we were just talking about.
Exactly, it's a direct parallel. And most disturbingly, they are trained to raise their hands and beg for a permission slip from an authority figure just to attend to their most basic biological needs, like using the restroom.
Wow! You are training a developing human being that their own physical body is not their own jurisdiction during institutional hours.
That is wild when you frame it like that. It's the ultimate rehearsal for wage slavery.
It really is. And the grading system acts as the sorting mechanism for this compliance. The students who get straight A's are often just the ones who have mathematically proven that they will sacrifice their sleep, their weekends, and their mental health to complete highly abstracted, somewhat meaningless tasks just for an arbitrary gold star.
They learn to seek external validation over internal curiosity.
Precisely.
There's an anecdote in the readings that just nails this perfectly. It's about a 30-year-old corporate strategist.
Oh, I remember this one.
Yeah, so he's a grown, competent adult professional sitting in a massive corporate strategy meeting. He is actually the one leading the project they are discussing. And he suddenly realizes, with total horror, that he is physically holding himself back. His muscles are tensed, and he is actively waiting for a lull in the conversation so he can raise his hand.
Yeah. He was waiting for implicit approval from the authority figure at the head of the conference table to proceed with his own thoughts. He is 30 years old, decades removed from kindergarten, and that primary programming is still running the hardware of his brain.
That is the absolute tragedy of the invisible cage. The fundamental architecture of how we relate to authority, how we perceive our own right to take up space, it's poured in concrete before we are even old enough to question the mixing of the cement.
Man. So if our minds are this deeply trapped by that conditioning, what is that chronic stress doing to our literal biology? Let's pivot to the physical body. Because your conscious mind might try to rationalize all of this, telling you to be grateful for the job, telling you to just fake a smile, but your nervous system is keeping an incredibly accurate ledger.
It absolutely is.
And that brings us right back to that Sunday funeral feeling from the intro.
Right. The Sunday funeral isn't just a bad mood. We need to be clear about that. It is a literal somatic record. It is a physiological rejection by your body against having to re-enter an unnatural labor cycle the very next morning.
So it's biological.
Purely biological. Your enteric nervous system, which is the millions of neurons located in your gut, is constantly tracking whether your environment is socially and physically safe. And when it registers your toxic corporate environment as a chronic, inescapable threat, it floods your system with cortisol.
So it's preparing for trauma.
Exactly. It was preparing for the trauma of the upcoming work week while you were still just sitting on your couch on a Sunday afternoon trying to watch a movie.
And this chronic state of physiological threat eventually manifests as severe illness. But the way modern medicine handles this is fascinating and honestly deeply flawed, according to the sources. The texts we are looking at point out that burnout is actually a healthy rebellion.
Yes.
It's a healthy somatic demand for autonomy rather than an individual failure of resilience. But we completely medicalize it, don't we?
We do. And again, this has a historical precedent. During the early Industrial Revolution, when workers first faced these brutal 14-hour factory shifts, they started experiencing fainting spells, severe stomach pains, chronic fatigue.
And what did the doctors say?
The medical establishment at the time diagnosed it as nervous exhaustion.
Okay, nervous exhaustion. And what was the cure for that?
Bed rest and drinking warm milk.
You're kidding?
Nope. They blamed the workers' inherent biological constitutions and completely ignored the toxic, inhumane factory conditions that were actually causing the symptom.
That is incredible. And we do the exact same thing today. We just rebranded it. Now we call it burnout.
Right. And we blame the worker for not having a good work-life balance.
Yeah, we prescribe corporate wellness retreats, or we give them a subscription to a meditation app. We treat human hesitation and exhaustion as a mechanical glitch that just needs a different grade of oil, fundamentally refusing to question the structural violence of a system that extracts our life force.
Because the body keeps the score. True trauma and exhaustion live in the fascia and the psoas muscles.
Okay, pause. Explain what those actually are for the listener who hasn't taken an anatomy class in a while.
All right, so fascia is the thin casing of connective tissue that surrounds and holds every organ, blood vessel, bone, nerve fiber, and muscle in place.
Okay.
And the psoas muscles are the deep core muscles that connect your lumbar spine to your legs. They are the primary muscles that activate when you flinch or curl into a fetal position to protect yourself from a threat.
So they are your survival muscles.
Exactly. When you are chronically braced for a threat like, say, a toxic boss, or the constant fear of layoffs, your entire posture is pulled inward in a microscopic defensive flinch. You are literally wearing biological armor.
Wow. So the tension isn't just in your head, it's literally woven into your physical tissues.
Precisely. And this is why talk therapy or cognitive validation, like, looking in the mirror and saying affirmations like, I am safe, my job is fine, often hits a physiological wall.
It just doesn't work.
Right, because the intellect translates the vocabulary. But the nervous system rejects the premise entirely because the tissue itself is physically armored. True recovery requires slow somatic release, not just a surface-level productivity hack or a new organizational framework.
And a huge part of that physical armoring comes from what the theorists call the avatar dilemma.
Wow. Yeah.
The modern worker isn't just selling their physical labor anymore. They are selling their identity. To survive in these quiet, heavily monitored modern offices, employees must emotionally dissociate. They have to put on a professional avatar.
A mask.
Yeah, exactly. They are actively suppressing their true reactions, masking their authentic personalities, and feigning deep, passionate interest in administrative tasks that offer absolutely zero real meaning to their lives.
And think about the biological cost of that. The emotional suppression required to maintain that polite mask for 8 hours a day drains biological energy significantly faster than physical labor.
Really? Faster than physical labor?
Yes. We evolved to endure immense physical hardship hunting, foraging, building shelters. But we did not evolve to pretend for 40 hours a week. The profound, agonizing disconnect between our daily actions and any tangible human impact is what breaks the nervous system.
So the exhaustion isn't a bug, it's a feature.
It is a highly calibrated feature. When you are deeply exhausted, you don't plan long-term. You don't research alternatives or build an exit strategy. The system is perfectly calibrated to leave you with just enough energy to rest, recover, and show up again the next morning.
Which perfectly transitions us into the terrifying reality of how corporations actually manage these exhausted avatars. We're moving from the physical cage into the digital panopticon. Here's where it gets really interesting. I was reading this anecdote in the research about Employee 107, and it genuinely sent a shiver down my spine.
Oh, that is a perfect example of modern Orwellian dynamics. Share that story.
So one of the authors was filling out a digital purchase order for their company, and in the notes field, they simply typed a colleague's first name, Robert, just to indicate who the order was actually for.
Very standard.
Totally innocent. But within 24 hours, the system flagged it, and HR formally reprimanded the author for a GDPR data privacy violation.
And just for context for the listener, GDPR is the General Data Protection Regulation in Europe. It's designed to protect consumer privacy. But here, it's being completely inverted.
Exactly. Robert was legally not allowed to exist as a human being in the internal database. He was entirely designated, tracked, and managed as Employee 107.
It reveals the underlying values of modern corporate life. When a system forces you to reduce a human being to a numeric metric, it communicates its priorities very clearly. Numbers don't have families, numbers don't get sick, and crucially, numbers can be deleted without any moral hesitation. We see this in the modern corporate memory hole.
Oh man, the memory hole is so dark.
Think about it. When an employee leaves, even after 10 years of pouring their absolute soul into a company, missing their kids' birthdays, working weekends, what happens?
It's just vanished.
Their entire digital legacy is systematically scrubbed from reality within 48 hours. Emails purged, Slack accounts deactivated, access revoked. They cease to exist. Yet the oil paintings of the executives hang forever in the lobby. The rule of anonymity and privacy is weaponized exclusively against the workers to ensure they remain historically invisible.
And management of those invisible workers is increasingly being handed over to literal machines, which is just wild. This brings in the concept of algorithmic governance, which the theorists link back to Julian Jaynes's idea of the bicameral mind.
Right. Julian Jaynes had this fascinating theory that ancient humans didn't have introspective consciousness the way we do today. He argued that they actually heard auditory commands from their right hemisphere and interpreted them as the literal voices of the gods, commanding them to build the pyramids or go to war.
And the terrifying proposition here is that those voices didn't stop. They just changed their technological mask.
Precisely. The ancient gods have been replaced by predictive algorithms, KPIs, key performance indicators, and the push notifications constantly chiming in our pockets.
It's everywhere.
Look at warehouse workers today. We have people being automatically written up by code. Not a human manager who can understand context, but a pure algorithm.
Right. There was the example of the warehouse worker disciplined because their bathroom breaks were exactly 11% longer than the system average over a 2-week period.
Yes. No human context, no empathy, just a mathematical threshold crossing into a disciplinary warning. These systems demand continuous partial attention, acting as digital divine voices dictating our micro-movements.
We are building massive, invisible digital pyramids of behavioral data for tech giants. But this isn't just happening to warehouse workers, it's happening to the white-collar remote worker, too. And in Byung-Chul Han's framework, he critiques this as the society of the spectacle, arguing that we've transitioned from a disciplinary society to an achievement society.
Han's concept of auto-exploitation is crucial here. In a disciplinary society, think of the 19th century factory we discussed. You had an external boss with a whip. You knew you were being exploited by someone else. The dynamic was obvious. But in the achievement society, we have internalized the capitalist mandate. We hold the whip ourselves.
We become our own worst bosses.
Exactly. We treat ourselves as a perpetual startup, you Inc. We track our sleep scores not to feel rested, but to optimize our weekend productivity. We monetize our hobbies into side hustles. And this is infinitely more efficient for the economic system because it masquerades as freedom.
You feel like you're in control.
Right. You push yourself to the brink of a nervous breakdown and genuinely believe you are doing it for your own self-actualization. Yeah. We are simultaneously the master and the slave in one body.
Okay, but this raises a massive obvious question. If the body is screaming in pain, if we are being erased into numbers and managed by algorithms, and if we are exploiting ourselves to the point of burnout, why don't we just leave? Why do we stay in the arena?
Because the game provides its own handcuffs. This is what the theorists call the consumption dependency loop, or the hedonic trap.
The hedonic trap.
Yeah. When you spend 40 to 60 hours a week in a system that devalues you, strips your autonomy, and forces you to wear a mask, you accumulate a profound sense of inadequacy and existential shame.
And consumerism offers an off-the-shelf cure for that emptiness.
Exactly. Luxury as a leash.
Right. You buy a $1,000 designer bag or the brand new iPhone every single year, not for utility. I mean, a $10 canvas tote carries your keys just fine, and last year's phone makes calls perfectly. You buy it as a digital shekel. You buy it to mask the shame, to prove to the world that you are a successful player in an economic game that is otherwise crushing your soul.
But the relief evaporates the second the credit card clears.
It always does.
Because it's a biological adaptation.
Yeah.
The macroeconomic reality is that you continuously upgrade your lifestyle to match your salary. You take on a massive mortgage, a car payment, high-interest credit card debt. You manually increase the speed on your own hedonic treadmill.
Do you trap yourself?
Yes. This creates a manufactured financial desperation. When your burn rate requires every single cent of your paycheck, you completely lose the ability to walk away from a toxic job. You silently communicate to your employer, I literally cannot survive without you next month, so do whatever you want to me. You hand the leverage directly back to the system.
It's an incredibly bleak architecture. The system designs the stress and then sells you the temporary, expensive cure that locks you further into the system.
It is. But the gates to this invisible arena are actually unlocked. The physical and digital barriers are real, but the primary barrier keeping us inside is psychological.
Okay, let's shift the narrative inward then. If the gate is unlocked, why do we psychologically refuse to walk out of it?
It comes down to human neurochemistry and the biological fear of the unknown. The human brain is essentially a hyper-advanced prediction machine. It is optimizing strictly for survival, not for happiness. To the Paleolithic parts of our brain, predictable misery is always preferable to unpredictable joy.
Because the unknown is mathematically indistinguishable from death to a caveman brain.
Exactly. This creates what researchers call the identity bottleneck. Thinkers like Yasmin and Dr. Joe Dispenza explain that the universe, or the system of life, responds to who you are, not just what you consciously want.
Right.
Your ego, your constructed identity, was formed in childhood to survive your specific environment. It will fight tooth and nail to prevent its own obsolescence.
So when you try to step into a new reality, whether that is financial abundance, digital autonomy, or even just a healthy relationship, your nervous system subconsciously rejects it.
It hits a humility ceiling. Abundance feels biologically unsafe because it requires abandoning the predictive model that kept you alive yesterday. This is the root of self-sabotage.
That makes so much sense.
You're subconsciously destroying your own progress because your nervous system prefers the familiar pain of the cage to the terrifying open plains of freedom.
Which means we can't just think our way out of the cage. We have to address the subconscious somatic level. And this brings us to a profound framework from YouTuber Alexis Saranoga for overcoming creative and personal blocks. She utilizes Jungian shadow work and somatic experiencing. It's a three-part triad. Step 1, amar la propriorité, which translates to loving your unloved wounds.
Society tells us that when we feel panic, hesitation, or a creative block, it's a toxic enemy. We're told we have to violently battle it or suppress it. We treat human hesitation as a mechanical glitch. But Saranoga posits that fear is just a somatic signal. It is a neglected emotional part of yourself demanding your grace.
I love the analogy used in the analysis here. Suppressing this fear is like smashing the check engine light on your car's dashboard.
It's the perfect metaphor. Modern hustle culture says put black tape over the check engine light and grind through the friction. But smashing the light doesn't fix the fuel injector. It guarantees a catastrophic engine failure down the road, which, in human terms, is a nervous breakdown. Loving the wound means pulling the car over, reading the diagnostic code, and acknowledging that your nervous system is throwing up a protective wall to keep you from being seen and judged.
You have to sit with the vulnerability. And once that biological alarm system is acknowledged, we move to the Jungian aspect, step 2, dancer l'ombra, or dancing with the shadow. Carl Jung described the shadow as the parts of our psyche that we suppress, deny, or hide away because our childhood environment taught us they were unacceptable.
And it's crucial to note that the shadow isn't just malice or evil. It contains our golden shadow, our unpolished weirdness, our raw passions, our intense, socially unacceptable desires.
Saranoga uses this highly visceral metaphor of a screaming tarantula. Imagine your suppressed shadow is a terrifying, massive spider screaming in your face. Our instinct is to run away, right? To lock it in a box. But the framework challenges us to take it by the hand and dance with it. Because maintaining the psychological fracture of hiding your shadow takes a massive physical toll.
The other analogy she uses is holding a giant beach ball underwater.
Oh, yes. Imagine being in a pool and trying to hold a huge, inflated beach ball perfectly submerged beneath the surface.
It takes massive, relentless baseline energy. You are constantly adjusting, constantly fighting the buoyancy. In psychological terms, you are living in a chronic, low-grade state of terror, suffering from imposter syndrome, terrified someone will find out the truth about you, and the beach ball will explode to the surface.
That sounds exhausting.
It is. But when you finally just let the ball float, you get your arms back.
You recover your baseline energy.
Exactly. You cannot selectively numb emotions. If you hide your messy, ugly parts out of fear of judgment, you inadvertently dam up your raw creativity, your drive, and your authentic magnetism. When you integrate the tarantula, when you let the beach ball float, the shadow shrinks down and transforms from a monster into pure creative fuel.
But internal integration isn't enough on its own, right? You can be deeply self-aware, totally integrated with your shadow, and still sit on the couch doing absolutely nothing, which requires step 3, attraversare loco, walking through the fire.
Systematized action.
Exactly. You have to literally override your nervous system's demand for safety by taking action while you are still terrified. You force your brain to watch you survive the friction until it births a completely new, confident identity.
And this transition from thought to action is one of the most difficult hurdles in the human experience. To truly understand the mechanics of this, we have to bring in the 19th century philosopher Søren Kierkegaard and his concept of anti-rationalism.
Okay, let's go.
Because modern productivity culture operates on this massive illusion. We think that if we just read enough self-help books, color-code enough Notion workspaces, and perfectly conceptualize a virtue, we are actually making progress.
We mistake planning for doing. So how does Kierkegaard dismantle that?
Kierkegaard looks at all our planning and optimizing and says we are completely delusional. He argues there is a profound, unbridgeable gap between thought and existence.
Between thought and existence.
Yes. Thought is the realm of infinite possibility. In your mind, everything is possible. You can imagine 10 different career paths, endless ways to handle a conflict, or the perfect novel you're going to write one day. It is a space of total freedom, But it is a phantom freedom because it demands absolutely nothing of you.
Right. It doesn't cost you a dime to imagine being brave.
Existence, on the other hand, is heavy. It's friction-filled reality. And Kierkegaard is unsparing in his critique of people who refuse to cross that gap from thought to existence. He outlines 3 archetypes of what he calls wasted existences.
Let's break those down because they map perfectly onto modern life. First, there is the thinker.
Ah, the thinker.
Yeah.
This is the person who builds a majestic, logically flawless intellectual castle in their mind. They could explain the entire universe, they know all the economic theories, but they actually live in a cramped, neglected shack right next door to the castle.
They observe life from a balcony but never join the dance.
Precisely.
I know so many people like this. They have the perfect plan for a business, but they never register the LLC. Then there's the aesthete. This is basically the patron saint of modern FOMO culture.
The fear of missing out.
Yes. The aesthete is terrified of boredom. They chase novelty, quick dopamine hits, and endless scrolling. They refuse to commit to anything, a career, a relationship, a city, because choosing one thing means closing the door on infinite other possibilities. So they just skim the surface of life, completely paralyzed by options. It's modern dating apps in a nutshell.
And finally, the mass man. This is perhaps his most cutting critique. The mass man is the individual who abdicates their responsibility to exist as a singular I by completely surrendering to the crowd.
They just follow the herd.
They look at society to figure out what to wear, what to value, what to believe, just to avoid the terrifying vertigo of making an independent choice. They are smoothed out in the third person, becoming indistinguishable copies of whatever the algorithm tells them to be.
So, what does this all mean? What is Kierkegaard's cure for these wasted existences? It's the leap of choice. Reason and reflection are an infinite loop. One doubt just leads to another doubt. You will never reach 100% mathematical certainty before making a life change.
You can't calculate your way into existence.
Right. To cross from thought to existence, you have to forcefully truncate your reflection. You have to make a violent, passionate leap.
Yes, and Kierkegaard fundamentally redefines what an action is. He uses historical examples like Dion of Syracuse boarding a ship to overthrow a tyrant, or Martin Luther taking the carriage ride to the Diet of Worms to defy the church.
Okay.
From the outside, the carriage ride looks like the action. But Kierkegaard argues the true, authentic leap of existence was the internal, passionate resolve of the will. The moment Luther passionately decided in his core to go, his existence was already authenticated. The physical carriage ride was just the external symptom of that internal leap.
The action happens in the soul first, and the body just follows. It's fascinating, though, to briefly contrast Kierkegaard's leap of faith with Albert Camus, who also comes up in these philosophical frameworks regarding the concept of the void and the absurd. Camus completely rejects Kierkegaard's leap.
Right. Camus argues that surrendering human reason to a divine mystery or a leap of faith is philosophical suicide.
Philosophical suicide. That's a strong term.
It is. Camus advocates for permanent revolt. He accepts that the universe is fundamentally indifferent to us, but he refuses to surrender our human dignity. He tells us we must imagine Sisyphus pushing the boulder up the hill with joy. The rebellion is the meaning.
Both philosophers, despite their totally opposing conclusions on faith versus reason, agree on one fundamental truth. You cannot wait for the universe to logically justify your existence before you decide to act. You must initiate movement. And if we connect this philosophical imperative to the practical modern frameworks provided by Yasmin on playing life by design, we see how this plays out in real time. Yasmin argues that if you do not voluntarily take the leap, the universe, or the system of life, will initiate a curriculum of chaos.
Ah, the eviction notice from your comfort zone.
Exactly. If you ignore the gentle taps, the subtle boredom in your job, the repeating toxic patterns in your relationships, the system will escalate the friction until the walls of your comfort zone completely collapse. It forces your hand. The universe essentially makes hell out of your comfort zone, so you are forced to evolve to the next level.
And to navigate this curriculum of chaos, Yasmin introduces the ultimate biological cheat code: curiosity.
Okay, I love this part.
When faced with chaos, our default biological response is to ruminate. We get defensive and ask, why is this happening to me? But curiosity shifts us into a player mindset. What is this preparing me for? And this isn't just self-help fluff. It is backed by hard neuroscience.
But let's talk about the biology of that.
There is a UC Berkeley study showing that curiosity literally lowers C-reactive protein.
For those who don't know, what is C-reactive protein?
It is a major biological marker for inflammation in the body. High levels are linked to chronic stress, brain fog, and a hyperactive amygdala. the fear center of the brain. When you approach a stressor with the curiosity of a scientist, you biologically shift your brain out of the amygdala's fight-or-flight response and into the prefrontal cortex, the exploration and logic center.
So you literally reduce systemic inflammation just by changing the question you ask yourself.
You do. It's a biological override.
She gives us 2 actionable rules for treating life as this cosmic game. Rule 1, track your wins. Because of our evolutionary negativity bias, our brains will literally delete our history of success to protect us from future disappointment. You have to manually override the ancient hardware by physically writing down your wins, providing empirical data to your nervous system that you are capable of surviving the next level.
And rule 2, reflect, don't ruminate. Think of the brilliant analogy of the Queen's Gambit. When a grandmaster loses a chess match, they don't attach the failure to their core identity. They don't collapse on the floor and say, I'm a total failure as a human being.
Right, they just study the board.
Exactly. They reset the board, objectively analyze the tactical error, extract the data, and move on. You have to protect your core sovereignty from the external volatility of the game. You are not your mistakes.
Which leads directly into those staggering Hindu concepts mentioned in the research. Leela and Ananda. If we are trying to play life by design, we have to completely reframe the purpose of the game. Leela suggests that the universe is engaged in a cosmic game of hide-and-seek. It created this messy, friction-filled reality, not out of lack or punishment, but out of an overflow of creative joy, just to explore its own infinite possibilities through our specific vantage points.
And Ananda proposes that divine, limitless bliss is our default baseline state of being.
This completely severs the modern cause-and-effect illusion of pleasure.
It fundamentally rewires it. In the West, we believe you have to endure pain to deserve pleasure. You have to achieve a corporate goal to be worthy of rest. But Ananda says joy is not a reward for compliance. It is your default setting when you strip away the societal conditioning. You don't achieve bliss, you uncover it.
Okay, so we've dismantled the 40-hour cage, we've integrated the tarantula of the shadow, and we've accepted that we must take the passionate leap into existence. But practically speaking, how do we actually construct a daily life outside the invisible arena? How do we survive this economically and spiritually? To answer this, we have to look back at ancient Greece, specifically Aristotle's concept of eudaimonia.
Eudaimonia is tragically mistranslated in modern culture simply as happiness. But modern happiness is entirely tied to consumption. A quick spike in dopamine from buying a new phone, eating junk food, or getting a notification. It's cheap and it evaporates instantly. But Aristotle meant something much slower and heavier. Eudaimonia is best translated as flourishing.
Flourishing like a plant.
Exactly. Think of an oak tree putting down deep roots, weathering brutal storms, and experiencing slow, deliberate growth over decades. It is not always pleasant, it involves suffering, but it is the lifelong process of becoming capable, wise, and whole.
And the mechanism the Greeks used to achieve this flourishing is incredibly paradoxical to our modern ears. It's the concept of spol. It's the Greek root for our modern word school, but it actually meant leisure.
But not our kind of leisure.
Right, I want to be clear, not leisure like binge-watching Netflix while comatose on a couch because your corporate job completely destroyed your nervous system.
No. Skol was highly active time, fiercely protected from the burdens of manual labor. It was time dedicated specifically to deep thinking, civic engagement, philosophy, and creative reflection.
It's the exact opposite of the modern wage slavery cycle.
Exactly. The modern cycle where we use our leisure time just to recover enough energy to go back to work.
So how do we reclaim that kind of active leisure today? We live in a capitalist system. We still have to pay rent. The frameworks we're studying offer a highly practical blueprint called the one-man company strategy. It starts with strategic minimalism.
Lowering the baseline.
Exactly. Drastically lowering your baseline financial needs so you are no longer chained to the debt-fueled status symbols we talked about earlier. You ditch the $1,000 bag, you take the control panel of the hedonic treadmill back.
And once you lower your burn rate and stop bleeding cash on status symbols, you build digital assets to decouple your time from your income. The profound psychological insight here is that earning even a single dollar of permissionless income outside the traditional structure mathematically proves to your nervous system that your survival is not exclusively owned by a corporate entity.
Even if it's just $1 from a digital product or piece of art.
Exactly. That $1 fractionally reduces the system's leverage over you. It begins to break that kindergarten conditioning of needing a permission slip from an authority figure to exist and thrive.
But in a world rapidly saturating with AI, algorithms, and infinite digital noise, how do we ensure our digital assets actually matter? The answer is radical authenticity. In an AI-saturated world, the only survival strategy is creating irreplaceable content rooted in messy, unoptimized human experience.
Because the algorithm demands frictionless perfection.
Right, but the human soul resonates with the shadow, with the friction, with the weirdness we talked about earlier.
And to create that, it requires embracing what the philosopher Walter Benjamin called deep boredom.
Deep boredom. I like that.
He described deep boredom as the dream bird that hatches the egg of experience. If you are constantly reacting to notifications, constantly scrolling, you are locked in a state of shallow reactive attention. You are just processing data for the digital panopticon.
You're literally doing their work for them.
You are. You must learn to tolerate a profound lack of stimulation. Only in those quiet, undisturbed, boring spaces can true narrative, genuine creativity, and soul begin to form. We have to reclaim our cognitive bandwidth from big data.
Which brings us to the final, profoundly biological tool to anchor all of this, the greeting of namaste. We've all seen it used as a trendy, somewhat hollow sign-off in a Chicago coffee shop or a yoga class. But the researchers strip away that mystical password aesthetic to reveal a 5,000-year-old piece of physiological and sociological engineering.
It is brilliant neurobiology. The physical act of the Anjali Mudra, pressing the hands together at the exact center line of the body, forces bilateral brain communication. It physically balances the logical left hemisphere with the intuitive right hemisphere.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and by pressing the sensitive nerve endings in the fingertips together, you create a physical anchor that focuses your sensory input, preventing the physiological overload that happens during social encounters.
And psychologically, it acts as a massive interrupt to the brain's rapid-fire threat assessments. The second we meet someone, our brain aggressively categorizes them: threat or ally, superior or inferior, rich or poor.
Constantly sorting.
Exactly. But namaste is structurally tied to the ancient concept of Atiti Devo Bhava. The guest is God. It is a leveler. It forces a physical and psychological pause that neutralizes our instant judgments, dissolving the toxic social hierarchies of the achievement society.
Right.
But let me interrupt, because is it weird to use namaste in a random corporate office or a coffee shop? Doesn't it feel like cultural appropriation or just incredibly performative?
Well, the cultural guides analyzing this clarify that form follows intention. If you use it as a performative accessory to feed your ego and look spiritual, yes, it's hollow. But if used with a genuine internal intention to convey unvarnished respect and shared humanity, to recognize that the person making your coffee is navigating the exact same cosmic game and curriculum of chaos as you are, it bridges the gap between individuals.
I love that.
It is the physical embodiment of the realization. I see you, and I recognize our shared struggles.
It's an intentional override of a distracted hierarchical mind.
Exactly. It's biological autonomy in action.
So we have covered massive sweeping ground today in this deep dive. Let's recap the journey quickly. We started by exploring the historical engineering of the 40-hour workweek, looking at how the Enclosure Acts and Henry Ford built the comfortable cage.
We saw how the school system's curriculum of obedience conditioned us to ask for permission.
We unpacked how our bodies keep the somatic score of our exhaustion, manifesting in the fascia as the Sunday funeral and burnout. We unmasked the digital panopticon, algorithmic governance, and the consumption dependency loop that acts as an invisible leash.
We then ventured inward, using Jungian shadow work to integrate our suppressed fears and weirdness.
We engaged with Kierkegaard's anti-rationalism to understand the violent, passionate leap required to move from abstract thought into authentic existence. We reframed the chaos of life as a cosmic game meant to spur our evolution, utilizing curiosity to lower our biological inflammation.
And finally, we mapped the exit strategy. Strategic minimalism, permissionless income, deep boredom, and reclaiming our biological autonomy through ancient technologies like Namaste.
It is a comprehensive blueprint for walking out of the invisible arena.
And I want to leave you with a final lingering thought to mull over. Imagine future historians looking back at our era thousands of years from now. When they look at ancient Egypt, they see physical pyramids of stone, built by anonymous laborers whose names were erased from history. But when they look at us, they won't see mountains of stone. They will see that we spent the absolute prime cognitive hours of our finite lives building massive, invisible digital pyramids of behavioral data for tech giants. only to be procedurally erased down a memory hole the second we stop producing.
Wow.
Tomorrow morning, when your alarm goes off or your phone chimes to demand your attention, remember that the gate to your invisible arena has always been unlocked. The fences are entirely in your mind. What would happen to the rules of your reality if you simply put down the blueprints, walked out of the shack, and decided that you finally have enough?